By the end of this video, you will understand why two of North America's most powerful predators cannot coexist peacefully in the same valley, and why the sight of a grizzly bear standing on its hind legs, sniffing the wind for the scent of a rival, is one of the most tense moments in the entire wilderness of the Rocky Mountains. What you are about to see is not a simple animal documentary. It is the story of a silent, brutal, and constant war being fought across millions of acres of forest and alpine meadow. A war for food, for territory, for survival, and ultimately for the right to raise the next generation. Two bear species, sharing the same mountains, the same rivers, and the same dwindling resources, locked in a rivalry that has shaped their behavior for thousands of years. If you think a bear is just a bear, this video will change the way you see these animals forever. The Rocky Mountains stretch for more than 3,000 miles, from northern British Columbia down through Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and Colorado. And within this immense mountain range live two very different bears that most people assume are simply the same animal in different colors. They are not. The grizzly bear, a subspecies of the brown bear, is one of the largest land predators in North America, with adult males weighing between 400 and 700 pounds, and in some coastal populations even more. Its most recognizable feature is the muscular hump on its shoulders, a mass of pure muscle that powers its front legs when it digs through soil and rock in search of roots, rodents, and hibernating ground squirrels. Its claws can reach 4 inches in length, built for excavation rather than climbing, and its skull carries a distinctive dish-shaped profile that gives it an almost ancient, primordial look. The black bear, in contrast, is smaller, lighter, and far more common, with adult males typically weighing between 150 and 400 pounds. Despite its name, a black bear is not always black. It can be brown, cinnamon, blonde, or even bluish-gray in certain populations of the Pacific Northwest. Its claws are shorter and more curved, perfectly designed for climbing trees at incredible speed, an escape option that a grizzly, heavier, and less agile in the vertical world, simply does not have. This difference in body design is not accidental. It is the result of millions of years of evolution shaped directly by competition between these two species. Black bears evolved in North America long before grizzlies arrived from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge roughly 50,000 years ago. When grizzlies expanded into the continent, they pushed into forested territories where black bears had lived undisturbed for generations. Faced with a larger, more aggressive, and more dominant competitor, black bears did not evolve to fight grizzlies for open ground. They evolved to escape. Their curved claws, their lighter frame, and their instinct to bolt toward the nearest tree at the first sign of danger are a direct evolutionary answer to thousands of years of pressure from a superior predator. In a very real sense, every black bear alive today carries in its body the genetic memory of an ancient war it lost and adapted to survive. That history still plays out today, every single season, across the Rocky Mountains. Where the ranges of grizzlies and black bears overlap, black bears do not simply live alongside their larger cousins. They live in a state of constant caution, adjusting their behavior, their habitat use, and even their diet specifically to avoid confrontation. Research conducted in Yellowstone National Park and the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem in Montana has shown that black bears tend to retreat into denser forest cover and steeper, more rugged terrain in areas where grizzly density is high. Grizzlies dominate the open meadows, the river valleys, and the prime berry patches, the richest and most calorie-dense feeding grounds in the entire ecosystem. Black bears are pushed toward the margins, forced into thicker timber where visibility is poor, but escape routes, meaning climbable trees, are abundant. This is not simply a preference. It is survival strategy shaped by fear of a very real threat. That threat becomes deadly serious when it comes to food. Both species are opportunistic omnivores, but in the Rockies their diets overlap heavily during specific windows of the year, and those windows are where conflict becomes almost unavoidable. In early spring, when bears emerge from hibernation, weak and desperate for calories, both species converge on the same food sources: winter-killed elk and deer carcasses left behind by harsh mountain winters, freshly emerged spring vegetation, and newborn ungulate calves that are still unsteady on their legs. A grizzly's sense of smell, estimated to be up to 7 times more powerful than a bloodhound's, allows it to detect a carcass from more than a mile away, even through deep snow. When a grizzly finds a carcass that a black bear has already claimed, the outcome is almost always the same. The black bear will assess the situation, and in the vast majority of documented encounters, it will abandon the food and retreat. Rather than risk a physical confrontation, it has almost no chance of winning. The physical mismatch between these two animals is staggering when you break down the numbers. A grizzly's bite force has been measured at over 1,000 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing bone with a single closing of the jaw. Its front paw swipe, powered by that massive shoulder hump, can deliver a blow strong enough to snap the spine of an adult elk. A black bear, while still an incredibly strong and dangerous animal by any normal standard, is simply outmatched in almost every physical category when facing a grizzly. Documented fatal encounters between the two species, though relatively rare because black bears actively avoid them, show a consistent pattern. A grizzly delivering a rapid, overwhelming series of bites and strikes aimed at the head and neck, ending confrontations within seconds. Wildlife biologists who have studied these interactions describe them not as prolonged fights, but as brief, one-sided displays of dominance. Because in nature, prolonged fighting is a losing strategy for any animal, wasting energy and risking injury, even for the stronger side. This is why most of the war between grizzlies and black bears is not fought through direct combat, but through avoidance, intimidation, and spatial segregation. Camera trap studies across Glacier National Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness have documented black bears altering their daily activity patterns, specifically to reduce encounter risk with grizzlies. In areas of high grizzly density, black bears shift toward more nocturnal or crepuscular activity, moving during dawn, dusk, and nighttime hours, when grizzlies, which tend to be more active during daylight in these regions, are less likely to be nearby. This temporal separation is a survival mechanism refined over countless generations, an invisible schedule negotiated not through communication, but through the harsh selective pressure of death for those individuals who guessed wrong. Female bears with cubs face the most extreme version of this danger, and this is where the rivalry between the two species becomes genuinely brutal. Male grizzlies, and to a lesser extent, male black bears, will kill and sometimes consume the cubs of the other species if given the opportunity. This behavior, known as intra-guild predation, occurs because eliminating a competitor's offspring reduces future competition for resources, and in some documented cases, killing cubs can even bring a nearby female back into reproductive readiness sooner, giving the killer a chance to father her next litter. Female black bears with cubs are therefore forced to be exceptionally vigilant, choosing den sites in the most inaccessible, rugged terrain, often on steep slopes surrounded by thick timber, specifically to reduce the chance that a wandering grizzly will stumble upon her family. Biologists tracking radio-collared black bear mothers in Wyoming's Absaroka Range have documented females traveling significant detours around known grizzly activity zones, even when it meant avoiding prime foraging areas, prioritizing the survival of their cubs over their own caloric needs. Berries add another layer to this competition, and in some ways, this is where the rivalry becomes most visible to the casual observer. Late summer in the Rockies brings an explosion of huckleberries, buffalo berries, and chokecherries across mountain slopes. And for both species, this is a critical feeding period before the onset of hyperphagia, the intense pre-hibernation feeding frenzy where bears can consume up to 20,000 calories a day in an effort to build enough fat reserves to survive winter denning. The richest berry patches become contested ground. Grizzlies, with their size advantage, will actively displace black bears from the most productive slopes, forcing them into secondary, less abundant patches. Studies in the Swan Valley of Montana have shown that black bear body condition, meaning their overall fat reserves heading into winter, is measurably poorer in areas of high grizzly overlap compared to regions where black bears have exclusive access to prime berry habitat. This is a slow, quiet form of warfare, one where the currency is not blood, but calories, and where losing consistently over the years can mean lower cub survival rates and reduced reproductive success for black bear populations living in the shadow of their larger rivals. Climate change and habitat pressure are intensifying this ancient rivalry, in ways scientists are only beginning to fully understand. As whitebark pine forests decline across the Rockies due to mountain pine beetle infestations and blister rust disease, grizzlies are losing one of their most important high-elevation food sources, the fat-rich pine nuts that once sustained them through the fall feeding season. This loss is pushing grizzly populations to search more aggressively at lower elevations, increasingly overlapping with black bear territory in valley bottoms and forested slopes that were once considered relatively safe black bear refuges. At the same time, human development continues to fragment the landscape, squeezing both species into smaller pockets of connected wilderness, forcing more frequent encounters simply because there is less room to avoid one another. Wildlife managers in Montana and Wyoming have reported a measurable increase in documented grizzly black bear interactions over the past 2 decades, correlating directly with both climate-driven food shifts and expanding grizzly populations following decades of conservation protection under the Endangered Species Act. The recovery of the grizzly bear itself is one of the most remarkable conservation stories in American history, and it is directly responsible for intensifying this rivalry today. In the early 1970s, grizzly populations in the lower 48 states had collapsed to fewer than 1,000 animals, confined to isolated pockets in and around Yellowstone and Glacier National Park, driven to the brink by hunting, trapping, and habitat loss following westward expansion. Federal protection transformed that trajectory. Today, the greater Yellowstone ecosystem alone supports an estimated population of over 1,000 grizzly bears, a stunning recovery that conservationists celebrate as a genuine success story. But that recovery comes with consequences for black bears living in the same landscape. As grizzly numbers climb and their range expands into areas they had not occupied for generations, black bear populations in those same areas are experiencing the direct pressure of a returning apex competitor, one their more recent generations had, in some regions, almost forgotten how to avoid. Human presence adds a final, unpredictable variable to this equation. Both species have learned to associate human activity with food, whether through improperly stored garbage, agricultural crops, or livestock carcasses, and this creates flashpoints where the natural rivalry between grizzlies and black bears spills into human landscapes. Wildlife officials in towns bordering Yellowstone and Glacier have documented cases where black bears, displaced from natural feeding grounds by expanding grizzly populations, move closer to human settlements in search of alternative calories, increasing the risk of conflict not only between the two bear species, but between bears and people. This dynamic illustrates just how interconnected these ecosystems truly are. A shift in pine nut availability at 9,000 feet in elevation can ultimately determine whether a black bear ends up in someone's backyard 3,000 feet below. What emerges from all of this is a portrait of two remarkable animals locked in a relationship far more complex than simple predator versus prey. This is competition in its purest ecological form, a rivalry that has shaped the anatomy, the behavior, the daily schedules, the reproductive strategies, and even the geographic distribution of two species sharing the same mountain range for thousands of years. The grizzly bear, dominant, powerful, and expanding, controls the richest resources the Rockies have to offer. The black bear, adaptable, cautious, and quietly resilient, survives not by matching that power, but by outmaneuvering it, using intelligence, agility, and an almost supernatural awareness of risk to carve out a life in the margins of grizzly dominance. Neither species is winning this war in any absolute sense, because neither one is trying to eliminate the other. What they are doing, generation after generation, season after season, is negotiating an uneasy coexistence written not in treaties or boundaries, but in body language, scent marks, avoided trails, and the quiet, permanent tension of two great predators sharing one extraordinary mountain kingdom.